everybody. Welcome back to the Accommodation Show. I'm very excited about today's episode because we are joined by the wonderful Madison Rifkin from Mount. Madison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I've been looking forward to this because I love our topic of the day. We will be talking about how to make extra revenue from your short-term rental, hotel, or motel business with upsells. It's a really great topic. We've covered this sort of stuff before, but not with someone that has as much experience as you and as much passion as you for this particular topic and ideas. So those of you that are listening, make sure that you listen to the end because there will be so many gems coming through. Madison, before we get going, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and a bit of your history into how you got into what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. So I am the CEO and co-founder of Mount. Essentially, I have been in the entrepreneurship world and really building Mount since I was 12 years old. So it's been 12 years in the making. Fantastic journey thus far, and one that did not start in the short-term rental hospitality industry. I actually come from the micro-mobility world and was helping launch scooter programs across the United States and the world, essentially. Those companies cause a lot of chaos. That was not something I had to do with, but excited to see kind of the innovation, and then jumped into the short-term rental industry after, a lot of learnings from that. So that's where I come from. Essentially, Mount is laser focused on upselling and how to optimize that at various properties, whether that be a short-term rental property, a boutique hotel, a large hotel. We're here to help optimize and manage all that.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, the scooters were always an interesting one, or the bikes as well. So where we are in Australia, people start getting the bikes and throwing them in the Yarra River, causing all sorts of chaos, hanging them off of trees and lampposts and all sorts of stuff. So that kind of iteration and figuring out how to overcome those problems has been important. But like you said, micro-mobility across the city is important. We don't need to all own our own scooters. We don't all need to own our own cars. And we can get a lot of leverage out of that. But folks, don't get mistaken that this is going to be an episode about scooters, because it's going to be way, way more than that. This is about how to enable technology and bridge the gap between upsells and technology to really drive more revenue into the business. And it can be quite substantial, actually. So let's talk about Mount and the idea behind Mount and what you guys are doing to help facilitate that interaction between the guest and the product.
Absolutely. So yes, Mount is essentially a software product that is a marketplace connecting your property and all the things that you want to be able to offer your guests, whether it be electric bikes, scooters, golf carts, kayaks, paddleboards, firewood, beach chairs, a podcast studio. Honestly, you can name it. You list it as a rentable amenity, and then the traveler, your guest, shows up on the property, downloads the Mount app, and then they can see everything they can possibly rent. Mount handles the payment processing, we handle insurance, we handle GPS tracking and management, and then you just get a check at the end of the month with all the money you've made. So that's in essence what Mount does. Now, where this comes out of, and really it came from the hosts that we started working with originally back 2 years ago, was the necessity of having all these guest requests where they ask you like, hey, can I go rent a bike? Is there a boat excursion I can go on? I don't know how many of you out there get questions like that. And then you end up sending them down the road a mile or two, whatever it may be. And it's essentially revenue walking away from you because they're going to go spend that revenue with that boat shop. And although you gave them the lead, there's no way to capitalize on any of that. And so that's really essentially the problem we decided to solve, is if you're putting all this time and effort into really curating guest experiences, you should be making money from that. And so that's really where Mount steps in, is we're the middleman. We can track basically your recommendations. We can track if you're putting the amenity on your property, and you get a lot more of these revenue streams than just directly from your booking.
Yeah, beautiful. Look, so you've got, just to go back to that walking down the path and going to the boat hire place, are we suggesting that we're making commission from the boat hire place, or are we trying to say that we're going to have boats on our own property to sell?
All of the above. So the way Mount really works, where it was originally built, is yes, if you have the boat basically on your property, or maybe your place is on a dock or something like that, then you would be able to access that boat with Mount and capture 100% of the revenue. But for example, a lot of properties don't have that luxury of being on the water. So how do you still capitalize on that? That's the other half of Mount that we will eventually be opening, not yet, where we can help you capitalize on that recommendation on those like affiliate programs, so that if you do send them down the mile to, rent that boat, you can still capitalize and recoup some of that revenue. Not, 100% because it's not your boat, but
Yeah,
some of
for
that,
sure.
yeah.
For sure. And look, I think that that's definitely a space, sort of the affiliate type program, marketplace, or however that fits. But for those of you that are listening today, I really want to impart on you that the value of this episode is going to be understanding how you can unlock some of the things that you're already doing to add a better revenue stream. And also the key medicine, I think, to all of this is not just about making money, right? Like, of course, we want to be more entrepreneurial, but can we use this technology to improve the guest experience rather than just making more money and people feeling ripped off?
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point, and one we get a question a lot is like, where is the line between upselling your guest and then having them feel nickel and dimed and ruining the guest experience? And so basically, Mount looks at the line as if it's an amenity that is typically sold within your community for rent, like an electric bike, for example, that's something you should absolutely be charging your guests for, because either way, they'll be spending about $90 on that rental, and it should be coming to you if you have the bike on property. Where I think it gets grayer is if it's a normal bike, and that's something that, a lot of guests are accustomed to you already offering. For example, hotels offer normal cruiser bikes for free. And so in that sense, you would probably just use Mount as more of that management piece so that you can see if it's getting used, when it's being brought back, you can schedule maintenance, all of that stuff, and you don't necessarily have to charge for it. Maybe bake it into your nightly price. They won't know either way, and you're still capturing on that revenue. So there's definitely a line. Like, I don't think you could charge for a hot tub stay. That's, not something people are accustomed to seeing.
Yeah.
But for example, the boat, the kayak, the paddleboard, that's all stuff that they would go rent in town anyways. So why shouldn't you be charging for it? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's a great explanation, is that I think everyone needs to know that there's a line, because I think a lot of people go, oh, great, I'm going to start charging for absolutely everything. And all of a sudden locking up the soap. People
Yeah.
can't, if you need extra toilet paper, then all of a sudden. So you've got to be careful with the guest experience. But then what you can do is you can look at products that people are already using that has an inherent expense to you as a business owner, but also where you know that if they're going to hire it or they're going to rent it, and that's where you can kind of jump in and go, hey, hold on a second, I can jump in there. Firewood's an interesting one actually as well, because that kind of, to me, it seems though there should be enough firewood for my stay. Why am I going to charge for firewood?
Yeah, so firewood was one that came from our customers, the hosts, or property manager, or whoever they may be. And it was actually more out of necessity. So we, for example, work with a property manager in the Catskills, which is in New York, upstate in the mountains. And they were purchasing firewood for their guests. But the way you purchase firewood, I guess I did not know this, is that you purchase it by the pallet, which is a massive amount of firewood. And they didn't have anywhere to store it, so they just put it on their property and made it free to the guest. But when something like that is free, the guest would overuse it, and they would take a log and then wouldn't burn it and then add another. And it was just a complete waste, to the point where her guests were going through that pallet of firewood in like 3 weeks when it should have lasted a few months. And so I think that was the perfect use case where it's like, hey, I didn't think about charging for firewood, but when you put a price on something, it really makes the consumer conscious at that point. And so they're actually going to use all the wood that's necessary, which in turn saves the environment. So I think it's a win-win there. But also it makes them more responsible. So I think the same actually goes for someone that was offering beach equipment for free. Um,
Mm.
and she had a really bad problem with them not treating it properly. They were breaking the beach chairs she offered. They were losing the kids' toys, sand toys. And she's like, I think it's because I offered it for free. So what we did was we bundled it all up, made it rentable via Mount. It was still free, but you still had to rent it. So the process was the same. And since we did that, we actually have seen no damaged chairs, no lost anything. And it's because that consumer became more conscious. And so I think that's the piece that's missing, is like, you don't necessarily have to charge for it, but if you make them feel more like they're responsible for it, someone's watching, they're going to treat it nicer.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that kind of, my mind immediately went there when we had first spoken, and when I got introduced to Mount. And well, the idea of upsells and that sort of thing is not new. It's the implementation that gets a little bit more complicated, more difficult, and I think that's where hopefully people that are listening, they go, oh great, yeah, no, okay, this is solving more of the puzzle, because it can be quite a complex puzzle to solve, but with the right tools and the right solutions you can do more. Because the other side of it is, how do you charge people, right? And
Exactly.
how do you do that? And you don't want the guests calling you and saying, hey, I want to hire the surfboards for $30 or $50 or whatever the price is, and all of a sudden you're working, you're literally
Sure.
working, spending time on the phone to manage this whole thing, and the margins diminish quickly because your time that you're putting towards that money. So with the technology part of it, and obviously, if we've got let's say it is firewood, where does the technology fit into the part of the puzzle, and how does it work?
Great question. Yeah. So firewood is a bit of a different one just because it is like a commodity. It's not actually rentable because you're not bringing it back. So what this person host did essentially was she bucketed the firewood into, I guess, portions, if you will. So a portion, she knew the stay was averaged 4 days and put enough firewood in the bucket for 4 days. She then put a lock on it, which is like something you'd put on your door. It's a four combination digit lock. And then she put on the Mount QR code. So that actually is the QR code that goes on anything you want to rent. And it hooks it up to the system so that when the guest comes with the Mount app, they create their account, put in their credit card information, and all they have to do is actually scan the QR code. Once they do that, it gives them the lock code so they can unlock their firewood for their stay. Um, and they're essentially renting. So at the end of the stay, they leave it unlocked, and the cleaning lady will just come and fill it, like she does with the toilet paper and everything else, lock it back up, and it's ready for the next person's use. So that's pretty much how Mount works in general, is whatever you need to list as an amenity, you actually need to lock it up either to itself or to something on your property. And then the app will give you access to that lock combination to use.
Beautiful. So if we're talking about things like surfboards or beach equipment that you might need a shed, or you might need a what do they call it, like a cable to tie it all up at the end, and that sort of thing. Um, I assume that you could also do boxes, so you could have stuff in little boxes with codes on them, where they go and they get the unlock code to do that as well. Are there any other sort of things that people are doing to sort of lock things up?
That's the biggest one. I mean, for the bicycles, they'll actually just lock it to itself, which means that you put the cable lock through the back wheel, so you actually can't move it. I mean, you can lift it up, but that's not going to do you any good. So in that case, that's how that works. But yeah, pretty simple. It's just a $5 cable lock on Amazon you can get. It has like 5 feet of extension and can use it to lock pretty much anything you need.
Awesome. So that kind of solves the locking part of it, and that sort of payment side of it, where you've got some sort of an automated system where people can pay for everything and kind of take care of themselves, which is, I think, really important when we start to scale.
Hmm.
Uh, then, in terms of all the different, a list of all the different things that people are charging for, and you'll have more experience than, I guess, everyone out there, because you're working on aggregate scale and you can see what people are doing. Is there a list of all the different upsells that people can do? Have you guys put something together like that?
Yes, so honestly, great question because we do have a ton of data on different types of properties, locations, and like what amenities are actually going to work. So, for example, you might come to us with an idea. You're like, I want to put on electric scooters, and my property is in Virginia next to a lake. And we're like, actually, based on our data, you should put in kayaks because they're going to perform a lot better and make a lot more money. So that's kind of the first starting point is you get a mini consultation, if you will. And then from there, essentially, when you go on the Mount website, and this is futuristic, this should be happening in about 3 to 4 weeks. We're relaunching the website. There's a button and it says it says click to list an amenity. And when you do that, it takes you to the Mount platform. You create an account, and then it shows you categories of what you can list that will just instantly go live that we've already tested and know work at pretty much every property. So the categories are firewood, beach bundles, electric bikes, which work fairly well everywhere, and then like we call it floats, which is like surfboards, kayaks, paddleboards, that type of stuff. So when you
Okay.
go in there, that's kind of how we guide you, and then there is an other button. So if you get really creative, because that's where our best ideas come from, is our hosts and property managers, you can actually click the other button and it'll essentially allow you to your heart's content to try and list whatever you want. Basically suggest to us what's the next category we should open. If we get enough requests, we'll obviously open it, but that's kind of where you can get really creative. And if we don't offer it, for example, like a GoPro camera, and you're like, I want to rent this out, everyone seems pretty adventurous at my property, put that in there and we might open it up for you. We've
Yeah.
had a fair amount of requests for like really large boats, which we're not ready to handle because the other aspect of Mount that I don't think I mentioned, or maybe I did, but we insure everything that you list on Mount for injury liability, which is a big reason why people don't do this. So the categories we have live are fully insured. Like a boat, we can't insure right now, so we don't want you to list it because of that liability. But if you list a bike, for example, and someone takes it and maybe hurts themselves when they're not on your property, that liability is still attached to you. So that's where our policy comes into play, and we cover all of that injury liability.
Yeah, well, that's really good to know as well. And but I think it's important that people always have the right insurances sorted for their guests, especially when they're offering extras that come outside of the property as well. And I think that one thing I do know with insurance, as long as you're transparent with your insurer and you tell them what you're doing, then they can put it together in your policy. And sometimes it'll cost you an arm and a leg and make it prohibitive, but sometimes it's not that hard to do either. But it's a really good point to raise is the insurance and liability point of view of it. Um, cool. All right. So we've got the different categories that you guys have already put together. There's a few that kind of come to mind for me, sort of things that you could do internally. So from anything from branded clothing
Mm-hmm.
to those all those extras that you might need, be it sunblock during the summer, which wouldn't come as standard, right? It's like, okay, cool,
Yeah,
this is something that people are going to buy all the time. Umbrellas for when it's raining, right? Like buy the umbrella rather than just get one that's on the property, because there's all these things that wouldn't be a standard. You wouldn't expect there to be an umbrella there, but sometimes it really just depends. But also just really thinking about your customer, your avatar, and what it is that they need, and what they'll be looking for. It might be that if you're pet friendly, that you've got a little doggy hamper thing that they can buy, with extra special treats and a toy and that sort of stuff. And if it's in a position where people are looking at, oh, I really like that for the dog, with a little few cool surprises, then you can really make a great experience for them, and people
totally. Yeah,
understand.
exactly. For like a bachelorette party, people have been like, "Oh, can we make like a mimosa package where it's like they arrive and they can make champagne, orange juice, all that fun stuff, all in a kind of extra bundle they weren't expecting, but it's there if they want it."
Yeah, 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 that the upgraded breakfast, right?
Yeah.
With the champagne. I love that. I absolutely love it.